Thank you very much, Mr. Jack. Ms. Leger Fernández, you're recognized.
Hello, Madam Chair, and hello, Chairman and Ranking Member. It's interesting because the other side of the aisle seems to be making the case of why we should restructure Homeland Security, because it's got a lot of different pieces in there that don't make sense together. So, we should take that up. I'm not sure that we would be able to do that right now in these circumstances, but where we're at right now is that when we were last here, the ranking member and Democrats, together with Republicans, have said, listen, there is so much controversy around Homeland Security, let's separate it out. So we had a vote on the two different bills, but it's Republicans who put them back together and sent them over. So
No,
there's
that's
a creation.
If I may, that's actually not quite accurate. The Senate asked for these bills to be put together. That's part of the negotiation. So, yeah, did Republicans put them back together? That was the request of the Senate. And that was the request specifically of my Democratic colleague, Senator Murray. We want all 6 bills together. You wanted it differently in the House, and we accommodated that. The Senate asked for what it got. So please don't blame that on Republicans. Blame it on the Senate, collectively on both sides, But that was the request we got. So, sorry, we sent them what they asked for in the form that they asked for. And then they made a decision to change it, which they have the right to do. And they've sent it back.
We have a problem right now because there was support for funding the other agencies, and we talked about the good work. In fact, you were here last time, and we talked about some of the problems. And in fact, I asked you, do you think it's all right that they are arresting Native Americans for immigration offenses and putting them in detention? And you agreed that that's not an okay thing.
Of course not.
That's not okay. And won't you also agree that it's not all right for them to be arresting any American citizens? In fact, Latinos often look like Native Americans, and that's probably why those Native Americans were arrested, because they have darker skin, right?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. But it's not all right to arrest any citizens for immigration.
Of course not.
And I think that that's the problem, is it's not all right, and they keep doing that. And when they do that, it's a violation of the 14th Amendment. It's a violation of our basic principles of what it means to be a citizen of the United States, is we should not have ICE going around and arresting hundreds. It's over 200 by now. Because the last document we have, it was 170, and that was several months ago. But the other thing that they're doing is they're arresting and pulling people into custody, and then the courts are having to throw them out. 2,300 documented court cases where they are saying you are violating people's due process rights. 2,300. These are court cases. This isn't us lefties or whatever they want to call us. We believe in due process. I would assume you believe in due process as well.
Of course I do,
Okay.
although it's not really dealt with normally in an appropriations bill. We have all kinds of committees, we have all kinds of legislation. Our legislation is about funding the government.
Right, and when we fund the
did that
government,
in the House. We sent it to the Senate in the way the Senate asked for it to be sent. That's not a legal matter, it's a procedural issue. Nobody's rights are violated by that. We had an agreement with what they would do. They broke that agreement. They have the right to do that. And they've now sent it back to us in another form. So to me, the real question is, do you want to keep the focus on Homeland, which this clearly does, because it's, as my friend, the ranking member, said, about 10 days of funding. That's all that's in here for Homeland. And if you want to vote against it, by all means, go ahead. Then there's the funding for the rest of the government, which was negotiated in a bipartisan fashion, and which was agreed upon by, and honestly, majorities of both parties voted for those funding bills. And now you've got exactly the same thing in front of you, the same thing that a majority of your party voted for and a majority of my party voted for. Why shouldn't that get funded? You want to deal with Homeland separately? That's what the Senate has decided to do. They sent it to you separately. But they put it all in one package. They didn't do what we did in the House and separate it out. They could have sent us over five
So I think-
bills.
I
They
think
could
that-
have sent us over 5 bills and then sent this as a separate package. I don't know why they decided not to do that, but I'm not willing to jeopardize the entire funding of the rest of the government and not pay military families and not pay federal workers and not pay safety workers and not fund FEMA in the middle of a disaster. I'm not willing to do that because I'm mad about this. And other people are, they have every right to do that. But that's the issue in front of us now.
So, Ranking Member, I think that part of what we're struggling here in this conversation is that this is a bill that will fund Homeland Security. It will fund CBP and ICE. And the idea that we can not ask anything, that we can send over a check and say, but you don't have to do anything, I think that that is, I can't see how that works. For example, last week, or last time you were here, we talked about body cameras, right? There's money in there, but there's no requirement that they be turned on, that they be kept on, and that the footage be available to law enforcement, local as well as federal. That's something that could get included in a funding package. Am I right, Ranking Member?
You're right, but let me just, I'm going to say a couple things, because questions haven't been directed to me, so I'm going to take this opportunity to say something. First of all, with the structure and the organization of the Department of Homeland Security, I was appointed to the committee that examined that effort many years ago, and I voted no, particularly because Coast Guard, FEMA, and other pieces were included in that. This was a conglomerate that people rushed to vote for, and my view, a mistake because of those things there. If my colleague, Mr. McGovern, were here, yeah, I passed all 12 bills when I was chair of this, of the Appropriations Committee. I also wanted to say to Mr. Roy, $4.5 trillion cuts that biggest cut for the wealthiest and for the biggest corporations. Give us a break on fiscal responsibility. Kristi Noem, let me be clear, because I have colleagues who asked me this. I said she should be fired, she would resign. If that now was the case, then we could bring impeachment proceedings. So that's where I am on that. Now, we tried to put in guardrails in the House Homeland Security bill. I have a list of them. I won't go through it, but many of the things that have been out there and we've discussed. Citizens, warrants, body cameras, requirements, et cetera, that was rejected. And that was what 207 of those, and I'll speak by myself and not everybody else. I said, as I said in my opening remarks, I don't think it took into consideration what we need to be doing with regard to ICE. With what we have here, is 5 bills. I have to repeat this, 5 bills. And this is information that I have distributed. Increases the National Institutes of Health. It has state opioid response grants. It has child care and Head Start. It talks about power of the purse, where we got some of that back. And on a bipartisan basis, overwhelming numbers. We rejected the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. Rental assistance is in there. Homeless assistance is in there. Funding to expand air traffic controllers, personnel, 3.8% for military personnel. Bipartisan basis, we said yes, no. We came to a conclusion. Did we get everything we wanted? Hell no. Did the Republicans get everything they wanted? Hell no. And that's the 5 bills that are there. Look, I've never wanted to run for the United States Senate, okay? I've been asked in the past, why would I want to go to the other side, to what I call the dark side, where rarely anything gets completed, etc. They came back, and they took this thing. And look, we talked about disassociating the two pieces so you could have that strength of your feeling about 5 bills, and you could have the strength of feeling about the Department of Homeland Security bill. And it is as it was currently structured, and which is something that I am not for. However, what I am for is for the 5 bills that we have passed. And this comes with it's not 2 weeks anymore. There was the 2 weeks. You're now, if this votes on the 3rd, you go to the 13th, it's 10 days. There is not a dime of increase in there for Homeland. It is a continuing resolution. And therefore, it is the same. I want the opportunity in those 10 days to talk about what we want to do in reforming ICE. And it is, and that's there. And I will lay out the same things that we've been talking about. You cannot detain American citizens or deport them. You have to have warrants for people's arrest. You have to require body cameras for people. We have to have an oversight capacity of an agency, which I said in my outset is lawless and is a rogue agency, the way it's currently constructed. Does it need to be reformed? Amen, it does. I'll take those 10 days and see what we can get. And at the end of those 10 days, if we can't decide to go with it, then it's a no vote. And Department of Homeland Security is shuttered. But not Labor HHS, not Department of Transportation and HUD, not Defense, not State, not the other 5 bills, because they're good bills with good things for the people that we care about. And I'll fight for those democratic priorities every day of the week and fight against a lawless and a rogue agency that is taking this country, turning it around, and pitting one person against another and killing American citizens in our streets. We have to change that. We have an opportunity. Without it, we will not have an opportunity.
But part of my problem is I keep hearing Republicans say, oh, we can't do that. Oh, we can't put that in appropriations. We can absolutely put it in appropriations, because if we're not going to demand that when they violate the Constitution, Chairman, they said that you cannot, that it's all right to kill somebody because they were carrying a gun, lawfully carrying a gun. And when he was shot down, he was already down. And when he was shot, that gun was no longer in his possession. Do you agree with the idea that you can get shot because you're lawfully carrying a gun?
Of course not.
Right.
I don't
So
think
that's a
any
violation.
American agrees with that.
Of course not. But how do you enforce that? That's the problem. They're violating the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment.
And probably be court cases on this. That's normally how you punish people that break the law. You punish them individually. You don't normally shut down the government of the United States because somebody did something wrong.
Ms.
People do
Leger
stuff
Fernández.
wrong all the time. But you don't shut down the entire government. And you certainly don't shut down areas where you have negotiated in good faith and have bipartisan, bicameral agreement.
About this. I'm
so if
talking
you want
about
to have
ICE.
this thing, again, I wish the Senate had sent it back separately. They chose. We accommodated them. We accommodated your Democratic colleagues in the Senate. That's what they wanted. That's
But
what
I'm
they
talking
asked
about
for.
what can we do?
accommodated your
What can we
Democratic
do?
colleagues
And you keep
in the
saying we
House
can't do that in
because you
appropriations.
wanted a
We
separate-
absolutely
you
can do
wanted
that in
a separate
appropriations.
vote on it,
Ms.
and we
Leger
gave you that.
Fernández.
It was
So-
Republicans and Democrats in this.
So I think that this is the
Exactly.
Madam Chair.
Republicans.
Republicans and Democrats, but it was specifically a
No,
Democratic.
don't talk over each other, please. We've been doing very well, but
We're
let's
pretty
not talk
passionate,
over
I'm
each other.
sorry.
I
I
know.
apologize.
This is the Rosa DeLauro we've known to come and love. No. So,
I will wrap
Ms.
up. but-
Leger Fernández, would you wind it up,
Yeah,
please?
I'll wrap it up. But I think that the frustration you are hearing us say is that we are hearing, including from the chairman, these don't belong in appropriations. And my God, if we are funding it, where else do they belong? And especially when you keep violating every single piece of this Constitution. And in 2026 alone, ICE has violated 96 court orders. So, Mr. Chairman, saying this could go through a court isn't working. We need to put it in the language of the bill, and we can. We need to make it enforceable. We need to have accountability, and none of that exists right now. And that's the frustration that Americans are feeling, because Trump is going down on this. Americans don't like what happens. They don't like seeing people gunned down in the street. They don't like the idea that, it's about retribution and revenge. You're going into Maine? My God. Really? Oklahoma has more immigrants than Maine does.
Ms. Leger
right?
Fernandez.
And the
I don't know what
retribution
the
doesn't make any sense.
population of Maine is, but we're certainly proud to have a healthy immigration community in our state.
So, but they're going into Maine because it's a Democratic state, and they're not going into Oklahoma because it's a Republican state, because that's what Trump has said, is he's going to
Well,
have
actually,
revenge and
that's not
retribution.
correct. I mean, I was with one of my county sheriffs over the break, and there were ICE operations in Oklahoma. He said, the difference is, we cooperate with them here, we work well together. So we haven't had the same experience.
That's
You know,
not
but,
right.
but saying there's not an ICE presence in Oklahoma, I can tell you it's just not true. There is.
There aren't any surges going on in Democratic states. And Madam Chair, with that, I yield back.